Hi everyone, it's Marla here, and in this week's video we're going to talk about one of the ways I like to decorate for Christmas. I've always thought of myself as being rather a traditionalist. I like to decorate in the colors of red and green with some gold mixed in. I'm not really sure if it's called traditional. I've noticed lately there's been a trend called Ralph Lauren Christmas, and so I think it lends itself very much to that style. But I think it also fits in with Cottagecore and Rustic. Anyway, I'm going to show you several projects that I upcycled from thrifted items that I'm going to use in my Christmas decor this year. One of the things that I really love to upcycle are thrifted frames, and so I am always on the lookout for them when I go into thrift stores. And I'm always looking for those that are ornate because that speaks to my love of all things Victorian. So I'm going to share with you some Christmas artwork I made using thrifted frames. I've had this frame in my stash for a long time. I loved it because it was gold. It was a little ornate with that rope edging around it. The one thing I didn't like though is that underneath the gold it was green. And you might think that that lends itself well to Christmas, but it just didn't suit my taste. And I really didn't like the shade of gold it was painted. So I took out Debbie's DIY golden ticket and gave it 2 good coats. I then did the same thing to the small gold insert. While the paint was drying, I took out an 8x10 quarter-inch board that my husband had cut for me. I initially painted it white so I could use it for decoupage if I wanted to, but I decided to use it for this piece, and so I'm giving it a base coat of black. I received this beautiful tartan plaid paper as part of Sonnet's Maker's Box. The paper is made by Royce of Roycycled, and I've always loved tartan at Christmas time. My father's family originated in Scotland, and the family tartan has a lot of red and green, so I was really drawn to this. I decided I was going to use it to cover the mat that went inside the frame. I used Debbie's DIY liquid patina to decoupage it onto the mat and then set it aside to dry. Afterwards, I cut out the center, and I thought it made a beautiful mat for this picture. I tried to smooth out as many wrinkles as I could, but I wasn't too worried about it because they tend to disappear as the paper dries. Last year, IOD came out with a Christmas transfer that has the word velvet in it. I don't remember the exact name, but it had some beautiful transfers in it. I love them all. And so I actually ended up buying several transfer packets. I chose one of the transfers of a deer that was in this to transfer onto the black. I think it looks amazing on black. I did some of these last year on black as well, and every one that I did sold in my booth almost immediately. I felt like the picture needed a little something more at the top, so I went to one of my gilded holiday transfer books and found the word joy and transferred that on between the antlers. It gave it just that bit of gold that I was looking for. Once all of the pieces were done, I got out my Titebond Quick and Thick glue and applied it to that small gold frame and added that to the picture. I think it's absolutely beautiful. The final touch for the frame was for me to go back with my Pent Art aging or antiquing paste and antique the gold. It kind of toned down the shine and made it look really rich and very much like the gold I would use at Christmas time. Once I was done putting on the wax, then I got out a soft shop towel and wiped back the excess. I then proceeded to do the same thing to the inner frame. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. It looks very Ralph Lauren to me. For the second picture, I started out with another frame that I had thrifted at Goodwill. I think I paid $2.99 or $1.99 for this frame, but as you can see, it has the ornate look that I like. It did have gold on it, but again, I wanted my golds to go together. I didn't want them to look like they came right out of the factory, and so I started by giving the entire frame a coat of black paint. I believe I was using Fusion's Coal Black for these frames. For the next transfer, I wanted a different colored background, and so I got out a 5x7 canvas and painted it in Fusion's Acacia Pear. It's a beautiful soft sage green. I really love the transfer of this little snow owl. I think he's beautiful, and I know he's going to look great on my mantle next to the other pictures. Again, when you're using transfers, just work slowly as you pull back the carrier sheet. If it looks like there's any still on the sheet, just lay it back down and rub it off again. In looking at this, I realized that's not enough. He's down in the corner, he looks beautiful, but the rest of the canvas was just blank. And so I went back to that gilded transfer booklet and cut out the words "Peace on Earth." Sometimes it's a little harder with the gilded transfers to see if they're actually transferring on the paint. And so when I put them down, I use the edge of my transfer stick and try to go into the little individual lines of the words. And then I pull it back a little bit at a time to look to see if all of the gold has come off. If not, I lay it back down and continue to rub it off. And there it is, beautiful. Again, I need more balance to the picture, so I chose one of the gold stars that was in the transfer book and transferred that just up above the little snow owl. And then I gave the entire piece a coat of Debbie's liquid patina. It's always important, even if you're using paint that has a sealer in it, that you go back and seal your transfer. The next step was to take out some of my DIY decrepit dust while the liquid patina was still damp and start putting that around the edges to age the picture just a little bit. When I had the edges the way I wanted them, then I went back and lightly dusted some of the decrepit dust throughout the center of the picture. I always want my end product to have a vintage look. After I was done with the canvas, I turned my attention back to the frame, and this time I've decided to use DIY's Golden Rule and to go over all the raised areas of the frame with that gold wax. When I was completely finished with the frame, I laid it down and looked at it, and I really didn't like the way I saw the black showing through. But I decided before I made any changes, I would put the canvas in the frame and see what it looked like all put together. I went back and added a little more aging wax, but I still wasn't happy with the way it looked, so I got out the golden ticket again and went over the wax, getting down into those crevices where the dark black was showing through. After the paint had dried, I went back in with my Pent Art aging wax and aged the frame, and then I was finally happy with it. I think it's beautiful. For my third and final piece of artwork, I took a frame that I had thrifted. It came from the dollar store. It was marked $1.25, but I picked it up at Goodwill for 69 cents. And again, I'm going over that plastic gold. In this case, it is a plastic frame with the Fusion black paint in coal black. I used a dabbing motion to make sure I could get the paint down into all of the little details of the frame. And then I went around and made sure all of the edges were painted black as well. For this frame, I decided to try a different gold. This is Fusion Mineral Paint in Vintage Gold. It's more of a silvery gold. It's very pretty, but again, not sure it was going to go well with the other pictures I had done. So I did end up going over it with only one coat of the DIY golden ticket. As with all the others, I used the PentArt aging wax to give it that vintage look. I also decided to paint the back of the picture frame black to make it look more professional. I used a transfer out of a different book for this picture, but somehow didn't get it recorded. I put all three pictures on my fireplace mantle, and I absolutely loved the way they looked together. After I'd finished with the artwork, I decided to turn my attention to some candlesticks I had in my stash. I wanted to upcycle them for the holiday. This candelabra is one of my favorite. I've had it for a long time, and it's just been sitting in the box. I didn't do anything with it. So I decided to find out if I could just use Rub and Buff vintage gold on it without having to sand it or spray it with shellac, anything like that, and it worked out beautifully. I was so happy with the way it was turning out. It was absolutely gorgeous. Can't believe I waited this long to do it. After I had applied all the wax I could with my fingers, I then went in with a small paintbrush to get those little areas that my fingers couldn't get into or couldn't reach, and finished it up that way. And then I just took a soft cloth and buffed it. Gorgeous. After I finished the candelabra, I took these two small candlesticks I had that were actually bright silver. I tried painting them with black DIY paint, but it didn't stick very well. So luckily, because it's clay-based, I was able to wash it all off, and then I took the candlesticks outside and gave them 2 coats of Rust-Oleum in espresso brown. After that dried, I used my Rub and Buff again in vintage gold, and then after I had all of the gold on there, I buffed them with a soft towel, and they were completely changed. They didn't look anything like the silver candlesticks I started with. I decided to do a third set of candlesticks. I had these brass candlesticks that I thrifted a couple of years ago, and I was actually using them in my fall display on my table. But I went and grabbed them, cleaned them up, brought them in, and did the same thing I had done with the other candlesticks, which was to give them a good coat of Rub and Buff in vintage gold. I think all of these candlesticks turned out absolutely amazing, and it was so inexpensive. Just thrifting them and then adding some gold Rub and Buff. It's amazing how a few candlesticks can take your tablescape from plain to elegant. For the next project, I grabbed a sugar box or cheese box. I believe it's a cheese box that I had thrifted, I think sometime this past summer. I put it on display with some of my vintage items and was kind of hesitant to do anything with it for Christmas, but then I thought, why not? I love to decorate for Christmas, and I loved using vintage items to do that. So I grabbed the lid, put some painter's tape around the edge, and then gave the top a light sanding because it did have a shiny sealer on it but I found out quickly that that sealer was not very thick. It came off very easily. And then I wiped it down, and I got out my Fusion coal black paint again and painted the top in black. Once the paint dried, I went back to that original transfer book and chose another transfer of antlers with the Christmas greenery around them. I absolutely love these. Again, they're very Ralph Lauren in style, but they also lend themselves to the traditional style, rustic style, and even cottagecore. Once I had finished with the antlers, I went back to that transfer booklet and found a couple of stars that I wanted to add on the sides. I wanted to make sure that the top was balanced and that I had made good use of the entire oval shape. I think had this box been round, I would have just stuck with the antlers, but I liked the addition of the stars and then decided to add a red velvet looking banner across the top as well. I went back to that same gilded transfer book and chose the word Noel to transfer across the middle of the banner. Once again, giving just that nice little touch of glittery gold. After the transfers were all applied, I sealed them in with Debbie's DIY liquid patina. To finish the top, I decided to put this tartan plaid ribbon around the edge. Unfortunately, I didn't get me actually putting it on recorded. However, it was easy. I just used my hot glue gun and glued it around the edge. To finish off the box, I chose some garland from that same transfer book that had the deer in it and put that garland around the center of the bottom of the box. I sealed the transfer in with a coat of liquid patina and the box was done. I think it's absolutely beautiful. What do you think? You can let me know in the comments. For my last project, I took a small sled I thrifted last year and decided that this year I was going to get it upcycled. It had a metal frame and a wood top, and then this metal ribbon and pine attached to it. It took me a hot minute to get it off, but I was eventually able to get it off. And then I sanded the top of the sled and gave it a coat of Fort York red paint by Fusion. I apologize that you're only seeing a part of the sled. Sometimes I don't pay close enough attention to where my camera's pointing, and obviously that was the case here. After I painted the sled red, I turned my attention to the bottom frame. These pieces sort of reminded me of antlers, but they were in a weird kind of caramely color, and I didn't like that. So I went in first with some Fusion cast iron paint and painted all of them black with the cast iron. It was probably the most time-consuming part of this upcycle, but in the end I felt like it was well worth it. I knew I wanted these to be gold, but I thought the gold would show up much better and look much nicer if it was over black as opposed to that brown color that they were painted. After the black paint had dried, I went over them again with Rub and Buff in vintage gold, using my fingers for the most part, but then going into the little crevices and V's with a paintbrush. Once the sled was finished, I added some Christmas ornaments and greenery to the top and a small candle. I think it looks beautiful sitting on my fireplace mantle with the artwork that I created and some of the candlesticks I upcycled. If you're still with me, thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I love the projects and I had a lot of fun making them. It means so much to me when you take the time to watch my video, leave comments. I hope if you enjoyed it, you will consider giving me a thumbs up and possibly subscribing to my channel. I hope you have a blessed week.